Welcome back to another edition of Recruiting Blitz. As always, I'm Tim Rickes here with Inside Nebraska. Before we get started, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, so you can get all these videos dropped directly into your feed. Um, Saturday wasn't what most people expected, or anyone really. I can't imagine anyone saw that happening. Um, we'll have a full, real football discussion. Obviously, this is the recruiting show. We'll have a full discussion later this week with Steve Merrick over at the Nebraska Football Show. It comes out on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. But for now, um, you know, the game and that loss specifically, Nebraska had an opportunity on and off the field, obviously on field, opportunity to get that sixth win, build some momentum into this 3 game stretch to close the year. But instead, Nebraska finds themselves sitting at where they're at, 5-4. And beyond the on-field opportunity, they had a good off-field opportunity too. Had 35 plus recruits in town, some of the top targets in town, and had a chance to make a positive impression. And I mean, if y'all have read over at Inside Nebraska, my intel coming out of the weekend, Nebraska still managed to make a positive impression on specific 2026 and 2027 targets. Um, Guys that were in town that had an opportunity to take in a game environment at Memorial Stadium, that had a chance to sit down with the coaching staff and talk to them. I mean, the things Nebraska does well in recruiting remain. They do a really good job of relationship building. They do a really good job of taking care of guys in the building and making sure they're, taken care of and, can see a future at Nebraska. They've done a lot of the off-field stuff right. But at a certain point for a lot of these, especially the regional guys, they want to see Nebraska win. They want to see, Nebraska start to turn things around. And I've said many times before, you can have a positive recruiting weekend without necessarily winning on Saturday. But for Nebraska, more than anything, it's not the fact it's not that they didn't have a good weekend. I do believe they had on the recruiting side of things a generally a good weekend just because of the relationships they build, the effort they put into recruiting. But there were opportunities that were lost. They had an opportunity to achieve more, a win, a decisive win. A more electric environment. You know, uh, uh, those were opportunities that were squandered, and it starts at the top. With the headliner of the weekend, 4-star in-state tight end Chase Loftin. Going into the weekend. There was some confidence buzzing that Nebraska, with a win, could have shut that recruitment down and been able to flip him from the Seminoles and kind of keep him in state. And he liked the visit overall. Got to hang out with a couple of the recruits on campus. Came up with some of his teammates. And got to experience that Memorial Stadium atmosphere. But he left that visit now. Kind of just he plans to get back to Florida State now to go see Florida State play Florida. He's keeping an eye on Texas A&M and Missouri and um, could make visits there. And so, this goes from a recruitment where going into the weekend, Nebraska had a chance to potentially lock down the number 2 player in the state and flip him away to, now that door's open. That door's open still for Florida State to lock him in. That door's open for Missouri to get back involved. That door's open for Texas A&M to get back involved. Nebraska had a really good opportunity and they squandered it, we don't need to harp on that one too long. That one's it's kind of a wait and see situation as Nebraska continues to monitor his situation, how he'd fit into the offense and kind of his commitment status as well. And obviously, Florida State's reeling on the field and losing commitments kind of steadily. So it's not like that's a better situation there, but at this point, Texas A&M seems like a better, is something that if he gets that opportunity to go visit there, I'd keep an eye on the Aggies there. If Missouri is able to get him on campus as well, I'd keep an eye on them too. It went from a situation where, like I said, Nebraska had a chance to shut that recruitment down. And now it's Monday. I'm recording this on Monday, and he's still committed to Florida State. And at this point, it seems like Nebraska. I will say this: talking to people close to that situation, I still feel like Nebraska has an opportunity to win that recruitment when it's all said and done. Still feel like Nebraska is the school that's best trending to flip him away from Florida State. But, the fact that he's considering other visits and is going to get back to Florida State, not great. Obviously not ideal for what Nebraska wanted this weekend to be. Beyond that, they had a bunch of 2025 and 2026 commits in town. A quick note, just worth mentioning. We spotted Dayton Raiola, Dylan's little brother, the 2026 Nebraska commit, on the sideline. He continues to grow. He's having a good junior season down at Buford, starting to kind of flash some things and put it together. And we're starting to get a better idea of who he is as a quarterback. But physically, he's starting to grow too. There was a point in the spring where people were asking, and I was like, I hadn't gotten eyes on him at the time, but people close to him had been like, hey, he's kind of hovering right around 5'11", 6 foot, and he's kind of shot up a couple inches. And it feels like, I said it on Saturday, but it feels like he gets a little bigger every time we see him. We saw him on Saturday, and he's standing next to Isaiah Mosey, who's 6'2", and he's got a good inch on Isaiah Mosey. He's standing next to Malachi Coleman, and he's kind of eye to eye with Malachi Coleman, who we know is 6'4". Dayton's kind of getting past 6'1", and kind of getting close to 6'3" at this point. Leaning out a little bit too, kind of becoming a leaner quarterback that kind of comes with the growth as well. So intrigued to kind of follow his development and how he continues to grow and what he ends up. He's a guy that's still growing and coming into his own, but really flashing some stuff on the field as well. He's done a good job down the stretch of this season with Buford out there in Georgia. So Nebraska's got a guy in 2026. So kind of just we'll see. End of the season we'll have like a full like tape breakdown and a full scouting eval, but we want to get a full year of tape on him out before we do that. But those are just touching on some of the commits that were in town. Other top targets in town worth mentioning. In 2026, Nebraska had 4-star wide receiver Xavier McDonald out of Morton, Mississippi, and his brother Dolph McDonald, a 2027 4-star safety, both in town. Both those guys, obviously brothers, but a duo that was making their first trip to Nebraska. They were impressed by the stadium and the crowd atmosphere. Had good conversations with the coaching staff. We saw them in pregame. Talking to Coach Rule and talking to Garrett McGuire and interacting with the wide receiver room a little bit. Dylan's continued to stay involved in peer recruiting as well off the field. For those two, it's just about being able to maintain a presence in that recruitment, and that's a recruitment where I think a win, them getting to see a win, would have been nice, just because it would have helped Nebraska earn some staying power. Nebraska's going to stay involved in that recruitment, try and get it back on campus in the spring, but they had an opportunity to get some staying power and did really get that. As in just in the sense that when you're battling the schools you're going to be battling for, those two out of Mississippi have Mississippi, Ole Miss and Mississippi State involved in their recruitments. Have the Alabamas of the world, the Georgias of the world, and the SEC programs really involved in trying to keep them in the Southeast. So Nebraska had a chance there too, and now those guys are headed home. A guy I guess worth mentioning as well, another top target in town, Hunter Higgins, 4-star defensive end out of Maize South in Kansas. He had another positive visit. I think the thing that really stuck out to him, he's been to campus a bunch this year. He came down for the spring game. Was even in town earlier than that. But the first visit when I was on the beat was for the spring game. Came back over the summer and came in for the Colorado game early this year and was back on Saturday for the UCLA game. He's pretty familiar with the game day experience at Nebraska. What really impressed him is the staff made the visit feel like a new experience, and I think that's something that's resonated with a lot of guys that have come back to campus is each time they learn something new about the program and it's a different visit every time. Nebraska does a good job of keeping things fresh, keeping things unique. There's not a lot of staleness, when it comes to recruiting. And so that's, again, not a lot going right on the field, but off the field, they're doing a good job. They're putting in the effort and they're doing the right things to get the guys on campus and make sure they have a good time. Again, at the end of the day, nothing really matters if you can't really sell results, but they're doing a good job there. And with Higgins, I felt this since the summer when there was a time where I felt like Oklahoma was a school to beat. Nebraska kind of made up some ground and have kind of overtaken Oklahoma since the summer. That Colorado game went a big ways in widening that gap a little bit. Over the course of the season, we've seen schools like Kansas State kind of surge a little bit for him. I still think Nebraska's a school to beat in that recruitment. I think he's a big fan of Terrence Knighton. He likes the vision they have for him along the D line. He has an idea of what he'd be playing. And he can see it. He's a guy that can play inside, can play outside. Sees a future as a guy that could play, could be like a Kai Wallen type in the defense, or could grow and become like a Nash Hutmacher type on the inside. So he's got some versatility, and I think he likes the way Nebraska uses their defensive linemen and the way they all move around. So Nebraska got a chance there. 126 visitor. I do feel pretty strongly about what Nebraska did this weekend. Four-star receiver Kohen Brown out of Waxahachie. I mentioned back when he was offered in the summer, he was a camp offer by the staff. And I mentioned then, he called Nebraska a dream offer. He's a guy that has some family ties to the program, has had some cousins over the years play at the program, has been on campus for 4 games before he was offered. But this was his first time back on campus since getting the offer over the summer. And he was just really impressed with, obviously the stadium once again. But he was a guy that had practically the entire offensive coaching staff working on him. Garrett McGuire spent some time with him. Jamar Mosey spent some time with him. EJ Bartell went to spend some time with him. Even Glenn Thomas, Nebraska's quarterbacks coach, kind of took him to the side in pregame and spent some time with him. Nebraska's working hard there. Cohen's a guy that's having a really good junior season down in Texas, catching passes from a 2027 quarterback in Jerry Meyer that Nebraska's also offered. And Brown's a guy that, he mentioned as well, Nebraska's a dream offer, but if the SEC comes calling, you'd have to take a close look at the SEC. With the season he's having, it feels like it's not far off from SEC schools entering. So this is a good opportunity for Nebraska to try and, they're near the top of his mind right now. I think this visit gave them an opportunity to kind of cement themselves near the top and earn some staying power. I think they've done that there. But for Nebraska's sake, it would be wise to try and push and get them locked in and in the class sooner rather than later before SEC programs start to get involved and figure out what his talent is. Looking ahead to 2027, just wanted to touch on a few names that were in town. Obviously, Ethan Feaster, 5-star wide receiver, the #1 receiver in the 2027 cycle. He came up to Nebraska. Again, has some family not family ties, but has some program ties. Mario Buford played at DeSoto. He plays at DeSoto. So the highlight for him was just getting to see Mario in action, and Mario was thrown into action because of injuries in the secondary. But getting to see his friend in action, his former teammate in action, was a highlight. He spent some time with the coaching staff. Even Isaiah Mosey kind of took him under his wing in pregame and spent a lot of time with him. And so Nebraska, again, a win there could have earned them some staying power. Again, with the schools you're going up against in that recruitment, LSU, Texas, Alabama, the who's are already involved in that recruitment. Obviously, #1 receiver in the country. I think for Nebraska, it's just about keep pushing, maintain a strong relationship, try and get them back on campus in the spring, and keep pushing in that recruitment. I think Nebraska got a chance there to at least hang around, but again, I think for them it's the biggest thing is going to be results by 2027 to try and get any of those 5-star types moving forward. Getting back to the 2026 class, a name I didn't mention, and I want to make sure I mention 2026 offensive tackle Claude Mpouma had a strong visit. It was his first time in Nebraska. This is a recruitment where I think Nebraska getting involved as early as they have is just really good work from the coaching staff. Getting him on campus as early as they have is really good work. Puma's a 6'7", 300-pound offensive tackle in his first season playing football out of Wendell Phillips Academy out in Chicago. A very strong program that has a good tradition of developing. He's in his first season playing football. Moved in from Cameroon, still learning the game. But you look at he shouldn't be doing some of the things he's doing in his junior season tape. Considering it's his first year, he looks very natural at the position. Has the ceiling of a guy that could play in the NFL one day, could be one of the top offensive tackles in the 2026 class when it's all said and done, as he continues to develop, as more people get eyes on him. We got eyes on him over the weekend, legit 6'7", had a good inch or two on Nebraska commit Julian Marks, who's 6'6". So the size is legit. It's a well proportioned 300 pounds athletic base with good lengthy arms and like a sturdy core. I think he's a guy that has all the makings of a future 4-star, if not or future 5-star, if not a high 4-star offensive tackle when it's all said and done. So good work for Nebraska getting him in town, impressing him early on. And I'll say this, to close out this discussion on the visit weekend. Um, Nebraska on the field, and it I didn't think we'd be saying this in November. But here we are. Nebraska doesn't have much to sell on the field right now, just because of what's happening offensively and the mess that is, and the up and down play of the defense this year. I think overall, I think Tony White's defense is still a draw because of the way they get guys in space and the way and I think guys recognize that what that defense could look like with better athletes in the future. I think that the defense sells itself a little bit still. And Nebraska still does a good job there. Offensively, obviously still a mess. But anyway, what I'm trying to get to is while the on-field stuff isn't great, what Nebraska does have working for them in recruiting that they didn't have in the past, you know, the facilities, some of the best in the country. We've said that plenty. But guys are really impressed, especially first-time visitors. Come on campus, get a tour of the facilities, and see, kind of the day-to-day lives that these the players have and live. And it's a draw. The opportunity to have all that recovery to them, to have basically everything they could want in terms of maximizing themselves as athletes and football players. It's available to them at Nebraska, and that resonates, and that will continue to be a pull for Nebraska on the recruiting trail, no matter what the on-field results are. The atmosphere and the crowd, and I understand, that's something that Nebraska's gonna have to earn back and is earn the trust of the fan base and all of that. But the energy of the fan base, the support of the fan base, continues to resonate with recruits across the country. Memorial Stadium sells itself. The city of Lincoln does a good job of actually selling itself too. So Nebraska has things working for them on the recruiting trail, and we're sitting here a little less than a month out now from signing day. I think most of the 2025 class is still intact. I feel generally good about where Nebraska sits with most of their commits. They're still working on a few targets out there. Go ahead and I've got a to-do list over up at Inside Nebraska about what Nebraska has to accomplish here in this next final month of the 2025 cycle, and the kind of the key targets that are left for them, and the key potential flip targets left for them. So go ahead and read that for all the names. But did want to touch on two things before we get out of here with the 2025 class, specifically the 2025 commits. Nebraska is in the process of there's a bit of a parting of ways happening with the 3-star receiver Bryson Hayes. And it's not really like the best way to put it right now. Nebraska's work has a few kind of irons in the fire at the receiver position. Hayes kind of been drawn to the opportunity to kind of stay home and play for Kansas or Kansas State. I think both schools are having some dialogue again with him. So he's exploring his options, and it feels like a matter of when, not if, he finds himself out of Nebraska's class. And Nebraska could be on the verge of another potential loss of the 2025 class. Jeremiah Jones, 3-star athlete out of Kentucky, a guy that we've talked about plenty over here, is one of the more versatile members of the class at 6'6", 205 pounds, could play safety, could play linebacker, could even, grow eventually into a jack type edge rusher, could play receiver, could play tight end, could play all over the field, is one of those do-it-all type athletes. It's been highly productive. At the high school level, playing all like in every single facet, contributing in every single facet. Missouri is a program that is really working hard there, trying to get him in the boat. Missouri obviously has some juice on the recruiting trail. They're pretty aggressive when it comes to NIL, and Missouri's going to get him on an official visit next week. His third visit to Missouri in the last few months. He visited over the summer. He visited early this season, and he's back again this next week. So I'd keep a close eye on the Tigers and their push there. Florida State also has an offer out. Louisville, is engaged. So, that one's not a done deal by any means. Nebraska's going to have to keep pedal to the metal if they want to, hold on to that commitment. And I think, it's worth, that's a guy that you make an effort for. I understand you see 3-star and you're like, maybe um, you're okay losing him, but he's a guy that I think can change a couple things for Nebraska. Um, on defensively, can kind of give them one of those versatile chess pieces that can move all over the defense and can do some things and is a really good athlete. And Nebraska's enough to has their work cut out for them in that recruitment. And there's a few others, at this point, with Nebraska on a 3-game losing streak. It's tough. There's not a whole lot, kind of sell on the field, and you kind of worry a little bit. Hey, are other schools going to start negatively recruiting against Nebraska? For a guy like Christian Jones, who's committed, and the main thing you wanted to see was has Nebraska turned it around on the field? And they answered those questions pretty early on, or they seem to. That win over Colorado, some of the early season stuff they were doing. But now you sit here and it's like, okay, Jones is committed, but what if Oklahoma circles back? What if Notre Dame circles back? What if another program circles back? Is he going to be open to that? Nebraska has, I think, an opportunity here. Their goals for the season are still very much on the table after the bye week. You get to 7 wins, 6 wins. Make a bowl game that show so that there's progress somehow, some way. I think that's so key at this point to getting this 2025 class on track. Trying to close with guys like Dawson Merritt or Michael Terry, is getting to that 6th and ideally a 7th win too, just to show that you've made some true progress year to year. It's so critical, I think, to not only finishing out this 2025 class strong, but being able to have some momentum in the 2026 class. Once Nebraska gets past this signing day, the attention turns to the transfer portal, where I expect Nebraska to be a little aggressive. And then the attention fully turns to the 2026 class as Nebraska looks to get ahead. And having a good season would be critical to building some real momentum in 2026 and beyond. And as of now, it's just kind of stagnant. That momentum's kind of stagnant. So I'm curious to see how Nebraska attacks the on-field and the off-field through the bye week and out of the bye week. I'm expecting the coaches to be on the road Friday through the weekend, or Thursday through the weekend, to go see some recruits and get ahead with guys. And I'm interested to hear what the messaging is to some of the commits and some of the targets on what they're building and how they kind of feel about the future of the program. So keep an eye on all of that this next week. But besides that, it'll probably do it for us here at Inside Nebraska. Appreciate you tuning in. I know recruiting isn't at the top of a lot of people's minds right now with everything else going on, but for those of you that have stuck around through all of this, I appreciate you for listening. But that'll do it for us. We'll be back next week. We'll be back later this week with the Nebraska Football Show. We'll be back next week with another episode of Recruiting Blitz next week. So stay tuned for that, and we will see you next time.